You won't find a better example of where the world of contemporary art meets contemporary commerce than in the world of shoes. This is the National Gallery of Victoria's sneaker exhibition, where classic and custom sneakers are on display as works of contemporary art. And this? Well, this is a shoe shop, where shoes are on display to buy. You know, like as shoes. But what about the artists who design or advertise these shoes? Are they enthusiastic, excited, exploited? Does being on a shoe elevate or devalue your work as an artist? Well, maybe try some combination of all of the above.
There's this idea that if it's in a gallery, then it's legitimate and it's valuable. If it's, if it's sold in a shop, then it has no real value, it's just
This is Niels. He's one of Australia's leading and most distinctive street artists. But he juggles that with life as a graphic designer. His work's in demand for everything from shop fit-outs to bandanas and T-shirts. He's also worked for some of the world's biggest shoe brands, although maybe he's a little bit over that.
Well, me personally, I'm not really very interested in shoes, and that's mainly because I've had that interest driven out of me by having worked with shoes for a long time.
What's involved when someone like you works for a shoe company? Like, what do they hire you for?
Well, essentially, I think they want your name, they want your reputation, and they want to be associated with somebody who's kind of making interesting work. They want to be seen as supportive of that and engaged with that. In terms of conceptually, the work that I'm doing artistically it's pretty vastly removed from what I do as a graphic designer. In fact, there's a lot of conflict between the two.
What are the issues that come up?
As a graphic designer, you're really servicing a client, and it's really heavily commercial, and it's seen as being very, it's corporate, it's legitimate, it's it's mainstream, I guess.
Yeah.
And what I do as a practicing artist, it comes out of me working as a street artist, essentially.
Yeah.
And, that is pretty much the complete opposite. What I really strive for is just communicating some kind of joy, or bringing some kind of joy. A T-shirt you could wear for 8 months before it wears out, To a 15-year-old kid, that T-shirt could be the most valuable thing they have.
Yeah.
And to, an established collector who's just picked up another Nolan, that Nolan might just be, it's just an investment, it's something that I don't particularly love,
They were well advised to purchase it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, if you're starting to think that this whole art, business, marketing, commerce thing is a creative and commercial minefield for artists, well, yeah, there's a bit of that. But there's also plenty of artists out there that are working in the exact opposite direction. This would have to be an ad, right? Actually, this is the exact opposite of an ad. This is not. This is not. We'll show you what it is.
Anyway. Yeah, and because we're going to have to save up for that. So it's all good, we'll be organised, except we just need to really hurry. Well, it's called Is Not magazine. I guess it's not. I mean, it's a poster really, isn't it? But it's a magazine that's kind of exploded. Also, that's sometimes the phrase we use. It's distributed as bill poster ads are every 2 months. And so you'll find these kind of at 50 sites on the streets of Melbourne, probably 40 in Sydney. Looks like an ad. It's kind of the opposite of an ad.
How is it the opposite of an ad? Like, what's...
Well, in a way, it sits next to ads, but when you see it in context, like there'll be like a Levi's ad next to it, or a beer ad, and it'll have like a catchphrase which is like 4 words long, and then there's this which has like 13,000 words and lots of articles. It's editorial in ad space as opposed to ads in editorial space.
We've observed people reading it, and quite often they'll be discussing it and trying to work out who is advertising, and what all this editorial is in aid of. They'll spend quite a while trying to interpret it as an advertisement, and I think when people realise that it's not, it's like a bit of a short circuit moment for them, which is really great.
We thought there were a lot of people with kind of interesting things to say that didn't necessarily have a forum.
This one, No English at the Table, is about, it's a fiction a piece about a Vietnamese teenager whose parents demand that he speak Vietnamese at home and don't value his English skills at all, and it's sort of this little drama that plays out around that. Physically, the table of contents is here, and it operates like a map, so the fiction feature is at A12. So if you actually want to follow the index, then you need to go to A12 and then you'll find it. These are our flash fictions, and they appear in every issue. They're designed to be photographed with a camera phone. We hope that people photograph these or send them in. And the other kind of really interactive part is probably the crossword, because I think the idea of writing on something in the street is kind of, you know, people think of themselves as graffiti artists, they just don't feel like they have the permission to do that. So we put the crossword in just to kind of prompt them, you know, because it's quite tempting just to fill in those squares. And
they're often filled out, I mean, as you go around and see them.
And quite often they're wrong as well, the answers, but...
It's much confuse the next person that comes along and tries to...
Yeah, but we figure that once they start writing on it, then they kind of continue to write on it, and they do. People leave a lot of comments.
There is a real skepticism, I think, of advertising and how kind of pervasive it is, and where you, like, you know, you're never sure if you're looking at an ad or not.
If there were one ad, I feel as though no matter how we positioned it, everyone would interpret the entire editorial as in service of that ad.
Yeah.
While projects like Is Not are subtly playing with people's expectations of advertising and business and public space, well, some street artists out there are just tackling it head on.
A lot of people, when talking about graffiti as graffiti artists, they'll talk about advertising.
Yeah.
You know, billboards, the privatisation of public space, how little space there is for people to communicate. Like, you know, where there's something, if there's a communication on the street that's not an advertisement or a community sanctioned space, like a public notice board, it's called graffiti and it's illegal. In a way, it's a protest against advertising. And that's why I say, you know, civil disobedience. Graffiti is civil disobedience against advertising.
Why do you think that there's people like the idea of a sterile public space, like one that's kind of clean and white and shiny and, you know?
People are so happy in their comfort of wealth, you know, and they love this kind of sterile environment. And I don't know whether it's because they don't want to know about how their wealth is generated. You know, how come Australia is so rich while so much of the world's so poor? And are we involved in that? Our consumerism, our 2 cars in the garage, our, you know, art that says nothing on our walls, that's like, you know, your standard print. It doesn't question our lifestyle. I think of the ego that must have to start thinking about developing a nuclear power industry in Australia, you know, or building a new skyscraper. I mean, the ego and the confidence it must have to do these huge scale public things and push them on the public. I suppose I'm intrigued that people get so angry at these small acts when there's such big issues happening in Australia. I suppose that's one of the appeals too of street art and graffiti and stuff, is that it's immediate. You know, if you want to get your article published in a book, you know, it might take you years. Yeah. But, you know, if you want something to say right now about something that's happening tomorrow, you can just go write it on a wall. Yeah. Or you can photocopy a poster and stick it up.